Hello, Garland Nixon here. The Neocons are in charge of the U.S. empire for now, and looks like we're going to live, as the Chinese say, in interesting times. Let's talk. So let's talk. That's one of the things. There are a couple of people. RT used to have a show, Watching the Hawks. There's a couple of YouTube shows out there that reference the term neocon, and I think my point tonight is this. I think the neocons really surfaced. I'll say they really surfaced in America. And what I mean is they came out from under their rocks and they started being featured on the media and television and on that. Let me put it differently. That I noticed, that I really noticed them coming out of their shell. I'll say was probably 2000 when Richard Pearl and Paul Wolfowitz and all of these people, two of which I might add, were both worked in the office of one Democrat named Scoop Jackson. And right now there is a Neocon Institute um, in London. It's like the head of the London Neocons, and it's called the Henry Scoop Jackson, the Henry Jackson Institute. And it's Neocon, uh, International Intelligence, Five Eyes. I mean, it is, plugged into the mainstream media. It's a bad, bad place. But so there are a number of neocons that came from. What's odd? When you start really looking at the neocons, you see a bunch of them, a lot of them that came from Eastern Europe. You see that a lot of them um, were previous. Here's the thing: previous communists, a lot of Trotskyites, but now they hate communists. They hate everybody. Come to think of it, they hate everybody. So why wouldn't they hate communists? The neocons hate everybody. But at any rate, and they bit by bit. Here's what's interesting: they're non-ideological in the traditional through the traditional lens of ideology in the United States. The traditional lens of the ideology in the United States is all screwed up. It is so screwed up that most Americans have no idea what right and left mean. And in America, it's right and right, and then neocon. So now it's not even right and left or right and right. It's just the neocons have full power, and they are not ideologically left or right. Ideologically, if they had to choose, they'd go along with the woke mob only because wokeness is something they can use. It's a tool of control. So they would, well, I'll put it like this: they're kind of fascistic, and fascists don't really fall left and right. If you're on the left, you say fascism are the people on the far right. If you're on the far right, you say fascism is the people on the far left. It's whoever you don't like, that's who you call fascist. Whoever you dislike, whatever ideology you dislike the most, you generally, most people will align that in their mind with fascism, because that puts them as far away from fascism as they can possibly be. You see what I mean? So if I'm on the far left and I say the far right is fascism, I couldn't be further. I'm the opposite of fascism, and vice versa, right? So, but all of those are just terms. They're just describing something. And when you get down, you got to ask yourself, what are they describing? In the United States, they're describing something different than they are, say, in Europe, say in Russia, say in, whatever the case may be. So basically what I'm talking about tonight, I guess, is this: America has fallen under the rule. These neocons, one thing about them, they're always wrong about everything, horribly wrong, because they're a bunch of psychopaths and sociopaths. We're talking about sick people who, and what is the key characteristic of the sociopaths, etc.? No conscience, a lack of a conscience, don't have a conscience. Psychopaths and sociopaths, boom, narcissists don't have much of a conscience. So these people have no conscience, and a lot of them from Eastern Europe, oddly enough, but they're from lots of different places. And their ideology is really almost like a religion. And as I said, we're using words to describe an ideology, so I don't have to describe it that much. You know what's up with the neocons. I could say things about their ideology. I could say they're generally ultra Zionists. They're generally, um, as I said, wokeness is great for them. Any tool that they can use for power and authority is good enough for the neocons. Now, what are we experiencing now when I say the neocons? This is life under the neocons. A couple of things, and one thing is of consequence, and everyone should probably have noticed this. You'll notice this when neocons are running something. Neocons have no concern with domestic policy. So the people, keep in mind, like a narcissist views everything as every person around him or her, everybody around them is nothing but an opportunity for them to feed their narcissism, right? The neocon sees everyone as a tool, as an opportunity to accomplish their goals. So they have no friends and they don't care about their own. That's one of the keys. Look at what's happening in Britain right now. Liz Truss, the people are going through hell, and she's like talking about crazy stuff. So I mean, yeah, we're going to do a tax cut. Well, okay, immediately. Here's the thing about it. You got to admit that your problem has to do with the rising cost of energy due to Ukraine. You can't admit that anything negative is happening from Ukraine. So they're just having what looks to be like a conversation about politics, but they're not. They're just throwing any fluff out there they can to bamboozle the people so the people don't ask the obvious questions about the elephant in the room. Is it worth what's happening in Ukraine worth the destruction of our economy? So the neocons, when they're in charge of a country, they don't care about the people. They don't care anything about domestic policy. That's just an aggravation. That's just an irritant. And I think neocons have got to the point now they have so much power in so many Western countries that they don't even view domestic politics as an irritant anymore for this reason. Keir Starmer versus Boris Johnson, Republican Party versus Democratic Party, the Greens versus whoever. You'll find that they have financed the governments of all of these countries, so it doesn't matter which side party wins. It's the same side. They're still going to get what they want. They're still going to get their money. They're still going to get their foreign policy. So life under neocons, which is what we're dealing now, it's a shithouse fire because the countries that they're in charge of fall apart. And it's been getting worse. Think about this. A country like the United States, when is the last time the U.S. has done any real infrastructure work? When's the last time the U.S. has fixed anything, repaired anything? It cost $1.5 billion. $1.5 billion. I've researched it. According to what I can find, the number seems to be about $1.5 billion. Let's call it $2 to fix the water system in Flint, Michigan that that has lead in it for the poor people of Flint, Michigan. They don't have a lot of money. They're just people. They don't have much. They're poor. We can't find $2 billion, but every time you turn around, we're sending another $400 million to Ukraine, another $40 billion to Ukraine, another $1.2 billion to Ukraine. But we have nothing for our people here. Why? Because the neocons see themselves bigger than that. They see themselves these grand chess masters in the world as a chessboard. And they're all those pieces on the chessboard. Remember, they're only pieces of wood or marble or whatever the chess pieces are made out. They're viewed as inanimate objects. So the countries can be played as a chess game. We can lose that one. We can get that one. We can keep that one. We can take that one. And then we see the other side's king and queens. That's China and Russia. They're over there. And we're always trying to get at them. We're always trying to destroy them. We're trying to take them out. We're trying to surround them. We're trying to checkmate them. That's what we're doing. It's an adversarial position. And it's the position that says we have the somehow God-given duty to run the world. But we don't have any duty to run our own country. And we've got nothing but enemies, no adversaries. Let's look at something. Let me show you something here. We always like to look at a story or two. Let's look at a story or two. Let's start with this. The dollar is stronger, but I'm not because I can't click on the right thing. Okay, dollar stronger than euro for the first time in 20 years. The euro fell below the US dollar on the Moscow exchange on Tuesday amid fears that the energy crisis will tip the European Union into recession. Oh, the European Union should thank their lucky stars if they're in recession. They should dance a jig. They should hug everyone they've ever met if they are in recession, because what's coming to the European Union, to say recession in comparing to that is like saying moisture in comparison to a tidal wave. They're screwed, blued, and tattooed economically. So there we go. The dollar ruble rate stood at 58.70. The ruble's worth more than it was when the war started, and the euro is both engines on fire, heading in a downward spiral. Okay, so that's now why am I saying that about the neocons? Because that's I may be wrong. That's an RT story. I may be wrong. I may be wrong. But I think that that was their plan. I may be wrong, but I tend to think that, and remember, John Bolton wrote a book that said after China that the neocons saw the EU as the next big threat. Think about it. The EU's got a strong economy. It's got a lot of money. It could get froggy. The Wolfowitz doctrine, they said they don't want any other countries rising up that could challenge them, even in a regional sense. That means the EU. The EU has talked about getting its own army. They don't want to see another empire rise in Europe. So what's going on? I think that the people intended to take out, the neocons intended to take out Russia and cripple Europe badly, right? So they're going to destroy Russia. In doing that, Russia was going to get angry. Russia was going to be economically fall, but not before they cut off the EU in fury. And Russia's going to fall apart, and the EU's not going to do too well either. It's going to struggle. But they're going to come in, the neocons, and take over what's left of Russia. And then they can get the oil going back to the EU, and they can get paid, but they're getting paid for it instead of Russia because they've taken Russia as a country. I think that was their twisted mind. Instead, Russia's doing fine, and the euro is rubble. The ruble ain't rubble. The euro is rubble. But I think they're still okay with that, because keep in mind something. They saw three threats. They saw Russia, China, and the EU. So I guess they figure, well, at least we eliminated one of them. So they're going to eliminate the EU. And of course, the EU leaders don't work for the EU. They all work for this machine. So, they're just operatives for the U.S. empire. So when you are, if you think about it, when you're under the neocon rule, no countries even have sovereignty, even the countries that they rule. So the neocons rule the U.S. Does the U.S. have sovereignty regarding what the people want? You see, we have a government that sees itself integrated with the government of the UK and these other governments. They all work in Canada, UK. They see themselves as the leader of this little ideological group of vassals and colonies, right? They're concerned with their dealing with those. But as far as the people at home, they're not all that concerned with. So we're just left out. We're completely left out. So the neocons are true globalists, and they don't really even see individual countries. They see a blob of countries that they control, and they see only two things: countries that they control and countries that they intend to control, countries that they've overthrown and they're occupying, and countries that they intend to overthrow and occupy. There's only two groups for neocons. And once it's kind of like a person who gets the toy. Somebody wants the new car, they get the car, they're all excited, they're wiping it down. Six months later, they're not as excited about the car as they were. They don't clean it as much. They don't wash it as much. They don't take it out on the weekends and cruise it just for fun like they used to, because it ain't what it used to be to them. And that's the way the neocons are. They take a country, they got to throw all this money in to take it over. And then after that, they can use it for whatever, but they're bored. Look what they did with Ukraine. Overthrew Ukraine. And then they're like, what are we going to do? Well, we got some nasty, stinking biological labs that could, wipe out a whole country, God forbid. I mean, we don't know what the hell we got in there. It's very dangerous. Oh, I know. We'll put it in Ukraine because who gives a shit about those people? And meanwhile, we'll put it right on the Russia border because if we are fortunate enough to have a leak, we'll have plausible deniability and say, "Hey, we didn't let it loose on your border; it just somehow got out." So that's what they are. They grab the country. Who gives a shit? It's a country. It's a chess piece. Do what you want with it. What a lot of people don't realize, the suckers don't realize, the sheep don't realize, is they feel the same way about their own country. The only reason Joe Biden's running around trying to get more oil pumped is personally, he's getting pressure from his party. And his party is saying, you got to do something. We're getting ready to get wiped out on biblical proportions. Right. And so he's like, okay, I'll get more oil. I promise I'll get you more oil. So he goes to Saudi Arabia, tells the Saudi Arabians apparently that he's going to start giving them more weapons, like he ever stopped. We're supposed to be stupid. But basically, you know what he's doing. He's saying, clean slate. You can say whatever you want. You can do. I don't even see what's going on in Yemen, and I'll give you anything and everything you need, but we need oil pumped. And that's all he's doing. And he's doing that. Do you think he gives a shit about oil prices because it hurts us? Because the average person is struggling? Or because, no, he only does because they're thinking about what happens in November and they're trying to save their own hides. They're save their own souls. They're trying to save the dynamics because that's neocons. They don't care. As it get close, and now let me say this: as it's getting close to November, the midterms, the neocons don't even really care about that. They don't care because they got enough control with both parties that they don't give a crap what happens to the Democrats. They're not Democrats. They're not Republicans. They're globalists. They see themselves as something bigger. So now the party is going to Joe Biden, and Joe Biden is a neocon, but the party is going to Joe Biden, and they're saying, you're killing us, dude, and something's got to give. And so Joe Biden's trying to do a few head fakes, but he's a neocon, and his administration, that's not what they do. Domestic politics, helping people. The only thing they do is create chaos and come up with another narrative. Hey, they'll let you, I mean, and you just forget it. Like there was a narrative yesterday or today where they said the Iranians are giving drones to the Russians. Do they understand what they're saying? The Iranians are giving drones to what else are they giving? Sand to the Saudi Arabians? It's absurd. But they just create narrative after narrative. Who knows why they created that narrative? But the neocons sit back in their rooms and they just dream things up. Well, if we said this, so these people would believe that, and ultimately we could do that. And most of that, first of all, are they trying to manipulate the Russians? No, the Russians know what the hell's going on. They're doing what's going on. So they're not manipulating the Russians. They're manipulating us. They're continually changing. Look, they come up with this story that the Iranians are giving drones to Russia, which is absurd because the Russia's military is so much bigger and more powerful, and they got so much more stuff than Iran. It makes no sense. And the other part they're leaving out is Russia's using maybe 20% of its military potential. So what are they got 80% of their drones obviously left. So it doesn't make sense. But here's what does make sense. Just think of it for a second. If you understand how neocons think, Joe Biden's going to the Middle East and he's going to rag on Iran, and Putin's going to Iran next week, I believe. So this Iran's giving drones to Russia to be used in Ukraine is nothing but some rhetoric because Joe Biden is going to preach against Iran and talk about how bad Iran is next week and lie. He wrote a Washington Post op-ed. Somebody did. I can't see Joe Biden writing it, but they said how they talked about Iran getting back in to the nuclear agreement when it was the United States that withdrew from it. The Iranians voluntarily continued to uphold the agreement for like a year or two. They just backed out because the U.S. backed. So they said the Iranians got to get back in it. Well, you know what? You get back in it first. It's just unbelievable to watch this. But that's the neocons. And so what we're going to experience is, what we're going to feel like, what we are feeling like. This is what it feels like to be a chess piece. Nothing more. All of these countries, this is what it feels like when your country is a chess piece. I've been to other countries that were chess pieces, and trust me, it wasn't pretty. I remember going to Venezuela under the harshest of the sanctions. And man, it was bad news. When I got to the airport, nothing had moved. No planes were coming. No planes were leaving. When we came in, the plane that brought us in, when I came in, was the only plane that moved. There was nothing else. That was it. The day we left, my plane, there was two groups of us. One group, their plane left, our plane left. That was it. There was no planes coming and going. They were completely, there was practically no fuel. You saw a few people here and there on the road with motorbikes, and they had car parts that they were taking to sell because you couldn't get new parts. And if they could get some parts off a junkyard, they could sell it to someone. But most of the gas stations were closed. They were only open every now and then, a day here, a day there. It was very, very, very heartbreaking. And to realize at the time that the United States did that, Barack Obama did that, intentionally playing Venezuela as a chess piece because they wanted Venezuela's oil and Venezuela wouldn't give them the oil. So the United States used its power, kind of like the mafia. Oh, well, we'll use the fact that we control dollars worldwide to screw you over completely and destroy your country. And that's where now Venezuela's doing a lot better now, but that's where they were. And then they blamed Maduro. Yes, that Maduro, he's terrible. He's destroyed. Sure, the sanctions have done some damage, but Maduro's mishandled it. The sanctions decreased their gross domestic product by 99%. Right. So that's understanding that and seeing that with your own eyes and seeing people who are desperate and poor and have nothing and no option. They're just kind of milling around. There ain't no jobs. There's much of nothing. It was terrible. And people talked to me on how people survived, which was barely. And you understand what the neocons are capable of doing to their own country. You know how I know that? Because they're doing it right now to Europe. Germany has been a rich country for years. That time is about to be behind them. Europe has been, an industrial and financial power for years. That's and the United States is doing it intentionally, and the leaders are doing it intentionally because this is life under the neocons. Europe, to us, it's people's lives. To them, it's chess pieces. Hey, we're in the U.S. empire, and EU's getting a little strong. What are you going to do? Well, to destroy their economy. Well, how are we going to do that? Call their leaders. Just tell them, look, shut up, destroy your economy. They'll do it. And ultimately, what are you going to use? Well, we want to harass Russia and destroy them while we're at it. So we'll do this Ukraine thing. We got a puppet over there. And, that's that. And then we'll just completely, and that's the other thing. They're pathological liars. In fact, they're worse than pathological liars. The neocons are ones, they're projection and the opposite of the truth. Tony Blinken is out talking about a rules-based order where the sovereignty of nations is respected. Really? The sovereignty of Serbia? Really? The sovereignty of Libya? The sovereignty of Venezuela? The sovereignty of Cuba? The sovereignty of Nicaragua? The sovereignty of Bolivia, which you overthrew? I go on and on and on. Just recently, they said to the Solomon Islands that if they entered into a military pact with China, that the U.S. hadn't ruled out military action. Is that some kind of a rules-based order where sovereignty is respected? Not hardly. So Tony Blinken and these people say the opposite. They turned reality in the inside out. And Victoria Nuland, she was Dick Cheney's assistant. And she was in think about this. She was in a Bush administration. She was in 2 Obama administrations, skipped Trump, and back for the Biden administration. So these neocons, they just stick around. Some of them missed out on Trump, but they were on the outside still orchestrating. So they were able to get a John Bolton. They were able to get a Mike Pompeo. They were able to get the people in there that they needed to get in there so that they could continue their evil works, regardless of who the president was. He wasn't in control of that stuff. So life under the neocons is to understand. It's quite simple. It's to understand and a lot of people get this. They understand that the neocons see the world as chess pieces, but they don't bring it home. They say, well, yes, sir, the leaders of the country, boy, they don't give a crap about the people of Europe. They're going to screw them. Of course, Australia, they're done. This country, they're screwed, right? But they don't stop to think that, no, I'm sorry. Unfortunately, they feel the same way about this country. So there will be no infrastructure. The only thing they did was this fake infrastructure bill. And what it really does is it allows the government to sell off the utilities to corporations. Biden's infrastructure bill is nothing but privatizing infrastructure. What they say is, I forgot there's a term they use for it, but basically it's like, okay, we'll sell off this water plant to the private industry, and then we'll take that money and build some roads or something. And so eventually, you know what happens? You have toll roads. Eventually, your water bill goes through the roof. All of your bills. This is what neoliberalism does, and the neocons are part of that neoliberal order. As I said, if we say neoliberalism is this blob, right? We don't have to. We're using the term neoliberalism to describe this blob. There's a blob there, a blob of evil energy, and we're going to name it. We'll name it neoliberalism. But this thing is a chameleon. It can present itself economically as neoliberalism and geopolitically. It can express itself militarily again and geopolitically as a neocon. It can express itself domestically as wokeism, as using the issues of tokenism and the issue of race and gender and all of these things as weapon to weaponize culture for two reasons. Let me say something. This is important to understand this. Wokeism does a couple of things. Number one, it allows you to smite your enemies, right? It allows you to smite the people that you hate. As soon as someone says something that you don't like, you can take them out with wokeism, right? It allows you to virtue signal. It allows you to say, I am moral, upright, and upstanding as a person. I have high moral requirements of the people around me, and when someone says something about a group that I find offensive, I'm going all out to take that person out. So it allows you to smite your enemies, and it allows you to claim that you are a moral person. And that helps with this whole go around the world and spread democracy or whatever. What they're really saying is go around the world and spread our culture, because our culture is superior to all cultures. That's why the Proud Boys run around saying the West is the best. The West is the best. All that's saying is, unlike Chinese cultures who say we're Chinese, this is what we do. Russian culture, we're Russian, this is what we do. Mexican culture, we're Mexican. Hey, what do you think about this food? Whatever the case may be, right? A lot of countries have their culture and they're proud of their culture. I've traveled to countries and that I've seen that kind of a nationalism where they're like, we love our country, you should love yours too. The neocons ain't like that. The neocon, and they push the U.S. culture, and there's a lot of bad elements in U.S. culture that have thought like this for a while, and that is our culture. We can't coexist with other cultures. We have to be superior to all cultures. Therefore, we have to spread this culture around the world. We have to be superior. And wokeism is part of that. It is for us to develop cultural standards. You have to feel this way about this issue, that way about that issue, blah, blah, blah. Develop these cultural standards to claim that these cultural standards are superior to all other cultural standards, so much so that they have to be put on everyone else, that everyone else has to follow our standards because they're such lofty standards. Who could look at these standards and say they're not the best? So that's something that neoliberalism does. And neoliberalism, neoconservatism, whatever this beast is, that's how it expresses itself as wokeism. We are the best. Therefore, we have a mission simply because our culture is better than everyone else's. We have a mission, a cultural mission to spread this superior culture worldwide so everybody else will be happy, even if we have to bomb them and kill them to make sure we do it. And while we're at it, if they happen to have some gold or bananas or coffee or chocolate or something that we need, we'll pretty much take that and they'll get nothing in return. But that's the least they can pay us for bringing our culture, for bringing McDonald's and Starbucks, bringing our corporations / culture to them. That's the least we can do. So, and ultimately, it ends up being a self-serving racket. And the other thing that wokeism is good for is ideologically. Here's what it does. A person like Garland Nixon says, I'm a lefty. Why? Why do I say I'm a lefty? People call me a conservative, whatever, right? I'm a lefty. Why do I call myself a lefty? Here's why. And you probably heard me say this before, but for those who haven't, I'll say it now. I consider myself a lefty because originally in the French Parliament, way back in the 1700s, it was a physical metaphor. The people who literally sat on the right side of the French Parliament tend to be those who supported the monarchy and supported the status quo, supported the nobility, right? On the left side, literally, that's why people say which side of the ideological aisle. Think about the metaphor. Or there's an aisle in the middle, and that aisle is ideologically, and you sit on one side or the other. If you listen to that, you understand that that was originally a physical metaphor. It was real. There's a reality. They didn't say stand, it's sit. Which side of the aisle do you sit on? So think about this. On the left side were the people who tended to support the lower classes, who continued to who wanted change, who wasn't thrilled about the monarchy and the status quo. So that's what it was. There was a left and there was a right. So I call myself a lefty. Why? Because I don't support the status quo. I don't support the ruling elite class. I want something different. I want change. I don't support that. I believe in cultures. And we should keep the best part of our culture and we should celebrate our culture. I'm not like throw your culture out of the window or whatever. I have a problem with people who have this cultural superiority complex that says my culture is the best and I got to spread it to everybody else. If your culture is the best, enjoy it. And if it really is the best, everybody will see it and be attracted to it. You don't have to go around the world and conveniently, as you're spreading your culture around, you might come home with some gold. I'm just saying, if there's some gold laying around, they get some culture, gold, maybe some oil, lithium, something you need in this country full of poor people. When you leave, they're going to be even poorer. They're going to owe money to the IMF and the WTO and the World Bank, and you're going to have taken all of their stuff. So you can just see it's a self-serving racket. So the neocons put us in a position, and now, so that's what they did. But now they're doing it to us. Pillaging. It's pillaging. And now what they're doing, think about this. This ain't right. You got kids on, and a lot of people know you're in college. Man, they set up like stands and in the chow hall, shall we say, right? In the cafeteria with people from Visa and MasterCard trying to get you to get Visas and MasterCards, trying to get your parents or your grandparents or somebody to sign for you so you can get one. Doing all this they can to get credit cards in the hands of college students. Why? Because they want to get you in debt. And not only that, then what? You get out of college and you owe somebody $100,000, $200,000, $300,000. I knew a friend of mine was a doctor. She owed $250,000 when she got out. So people get out of law school, they go to great, and they're paying $1,100 a month. That is the neoliberal domestic expression of neoliberalism. The domestic expression. Remember, I said you've got a military geopolitical expression of neoliberalism that is the neocons, and you've got an economic slash geopolitical expression of the neocons. That's the neoliberalism. At home, we don't have a name for it. Maybe we say Wall Street, something like that. The big banks. Well, I guess maybe that's the term we use, but they prey on Americans. The only thing they care about is putting Americans in debt and getting your money. Because what is debt? What's the definition of debt? It is a claim on future earnings. That's debt. It's a claim against future earnings. And that's the game. So the expression of the neoliberal, neoconservative element at home is a perfect example is college loans. Kids get out of college at 23 and you've already got them. They got credit cards. They got to pay off. You give them the credit cards and say, use it for school. As soon as you leave, they're on Amazon. They're cashing out money so they can buy weed, whatever. They're doing stuff that 18, 19-year-olds would do when you give them a credit card and they don't know any better. Now, by the time they get out of college, they're up to their ears in debt. There's nowhere for them. And they still got to work at Pizza Hut or Starbucks because there ain't much else. They're in a world of hurt. So this is the neocon way. It is a toxic ideology that presents itself when necessary as conservatism, that presents itself when necessary as liberalism. They use the term progressivism, but the only people that would call Biden and these people progressives are people that have no idea. But let me put it to you like this. Think about this. The ideological what do I want to use? This scale. Everything in America is slipped way over to the right. I guess for you, I'd have to do this way over to the right. Everything slipped way over to the right, to the point where a person who despises people on the left. Biden's trying to overthrow Nicaragua, trying to overthrow Cuba, trying to overthrow Venezuela, trying to overthrow China. Why is that? Why is he trying to? Why? Well, here's one part of it, because all of those countries are pretty much socialist style countries. They hate the neocons despise the Shiites. Why? Look at the Shiites countries. They tend to be kind of socialist. Iran, it is a government-run economy, and they got to cut all the money. So there tends to the Shiite axis of resistance, as it were, tends to be a lot of Marxist Leninists in there. I'll just say that. A lot of the. I mean, if you think about it, the people that they call the hardliners in Iran tend socially to view kind of Marxian economy as their model. So it makes sense that the neocons would hate them. And then there's other things that has to do with Israel, and that Iran is the most powerful military in the area and has the potential to be much more powerful. The reasons that they're giving for sanctioning Iran have nothing to do with the reality that it's chess. Iran has the potential to is already very powerful, and they don't want it to get any more money because they don't want it to get any more powerful, which it will, and it's still getting more powerful because it's aligning with the East. So the U.S. has held back the reins. They lied to the American people. They said it was about believing that the Iranians have nukes, or going to get nukes, or going to attack. A bunch of lies, all lies. But they can't say to the American people, you see, that's the thing about neocons. They can't tell the truth to the American people. They can't say, we have a geopolitical doctrine. It is totally, completely immoral. It's to maintain power, even if we have to sacrifice your way of living. We don't care. We just want to maintain power for the elite ruling class. Iran is a threat to that power because they can become a very powerful country. And we want Israel to be the only military power in the area. Iran could, and they could stop doing what we're saying, and they could upset the apple cart. We want to be the unipolar country. We want to run the world. We're trying to run the world, rule everything, put everybody in a position where we can be coercive and get what we want. And Iran's trying to throw a monkey wrench in that. And that's what's taken the neocons out. They're insane and sociopathic and psychopathic, and ultimately they're destroying things for themselves. So now we're at a point where, I guess, as inevitable, you got to give them 20 years of neocon rule with 2000, little over 20 years of neocon rule, and this is where we are. A little over 20 years of the Wolfowitz and the Pearls and the Adelmans and all these people coming into the Bush administration and the Cheneys. This is where about 22 years we ought to be, on the edge of a nuclear annihilation. Let's hope that doesn't happen. Let's keep our fingers crossed. On the edge of another world war between the U.S. and Russia and China and Iran at the same time. I mean, on the edge of famine, and possibly in some parts of the world of total economic destruction for Europe, complete economic destruction for the EU, and partial economic destruction for the United States. And what we're going to get is some really nasty internal uprisings in a bunch of countries. You're going to get that. It's already started in Holland, I believe, but you're going to see really bad what you're seeing in Sri Lanka. It wouldn't surprise me, because Germany's been rich. Germany's been well off. They're not prepared for what's coming. So the neocons, it's bad enough now. I like to be positive and say I don't think there's going to be a nuclear war, simply because the world is fairly sensible over and all, but I don't think there is. But you never know. Anything could happen. And if that happens, we can just nothing to talk about anyway. We'd all be dead. So it's just like saying, I wonder what would happen if I had a car accident on the way to work tomorrow. Or I wonder what would happen if I was walking down the stairs tonight and slipped and broke my neck. It's a waste of time. Nobody watching this right now knows that they'll be alive when I finish this segment. We don't know that. So we have to discuss life. My mother used to say, live as though you're going to die in 1 minute and live as though you're going to live 1,000 years. Put them both together. And, it makes sense. I mean, at any rate, so that's it, I guess. Life under the neocons is a very dangerous life. It's one where your government, and this is the most important part, Your government does not take into account the needs of the people, either outside of your country or inside of your country. Your government only acts in a narcissistic way to maintain power. If it feels that you're so angry that it's going to lose power, it acts. Your government tends to be arbitrary and capricious. If they and very much authoritarian. If they want you to do something, they're going to order you do it and tell you you're going to be punished if you don't. They're never going to give people a chance to make their own decisions and think for themselves. They don't want that. They want nothing but compliant puppets, and they're never happy. So I would also say this: my expectation is there will be uprisings in Europe, that at some point there may quite possibly be uprisings in the United States, that the initial response of the neocons is going to be, look, well, you don't have to guess. Look what happened with Justin Trudeau in Canada. The initial response is, I hate these people. They're a bunch of racists and misogynists and Nazis, and they're the worst scumbags. They're lowlives, and they should be dealt with. The question, remember he said this, the question is, should we tolerate them? I mean, you're getting close to a final solution for the unvaccinated there, buddy. Kind of giving me you're kind of giving me the heebie-jeebies. Right? But that was just a tell. These were citizens of Canada, and the leader of Canada had no love for any of them, had no compassion or empathy for them. He simply said, should we tolerate them? Well, if the answer is no, I guess you would, I think we know what that means, huh? We shouldn't tolerate these people. Really? Well, how are we going to solve our problem? Well, perhaps we should go in a side room here and have this discussion for plausible deniability. Let's just say some of the anti-vaxxers they ain't going to need the vaccination anymore. That's the kind of talk it sounded like that Trudeau was ready to have. One of very, very dangerous. Anyway, but the bottom line is that's their inclination. And so that's what you deal with. Their inclination is for secrecy. So and control. So now you can't go on social media and say certain things. As if that when I go on Twitter and I read some schmuck make a comment about Nazis in Europe, that it's in Nazis in Ukraine, or I see somebody post a flag like a Ukrainian flag that's mixed with a Nazi flag, that if I see that, it's going to change everything. If I see that, I'm going to be, yes, sir, I love that Zelensky. What a guy. And those stinking Russians, hate every bit of them. They're just, we got to do something with these Russians. Oh, what is that? Wow, a Nazi flag with the Ukrainian flag. Hey, I changed it. I love Putin. I love Putin. That's not how it works. There are people that have enough sense to read for themselves, to research for themselves, and to find out the truth. But the neocons don't see it like that. You are inferior to them. You should do what you're told or face the music, which is punishment from them. They don't have time for your bullshit. You're not doing what you're told, you got to get punished. That's where we are with the neocons, and that's the rulers. Let's see what some people have to say. Ooh, we got some Rockfinners. Oh, I'm going to start with Rockfin this time. Nixon nails it, says Jim Garrison. James Boyajian. I don't pronounce that wrong. He's got a tip. Thanks a lot, everyone. The Royal Bank of London's confiscation all of Venezuela gold reserves too. No one ever seems to think that's important when bashing Venezuela. That's a fact. Let me show you something. I think everybody ought to see this. And this has to do with Libya. Hold on. Let me find it. What I'm looking for is, okay, here we go, the BBC. So, well. Let me just talk about the neocons for 1 second. Let me get it something a point I was going to make. Let me get to this point. Watch this. All righty. Let's see. They overthrew Libya in 2011, right? 2011. So here's an article from August 26, 2011. Libyan sovereign wealth fund missing $2.9 billion. Mahmoud Badi said investigations had found misappropriations, misuse, and misconduct of funds at the Libyan Investment Authority. The LIA has total funds worth about $70 billion. 70 billion. Now listen to this. This says the Libyan Sovereign Wealth Fund is missing 2.9 billion. You go down here and they're like, there's been some problems in our total funds worth 70 billion. Let's see. We're going to dig for the truth. We need the help of expert people. We will use expert people, said Mr. Body, speaking to the BBC at LIA's offices in London. So the LIA, the Libyan Investment Authority, think about this. Libya had their sovereign wealth funds, $70 billion in invested and controlled through a company in London. And Tony Blair was instrumental in the overthrow of the Libyan government. And billions of dollars started missing right off the bat. Oh, geez, 2.9 billion. Oh, woo. Hey, where's that 2.9 billion? Maybe I left it. Maybe I think I left it. It might be in my other suit. I don't know. Who knows? It's 70 billion. Look, it's only 2.9 billion out of 70. What do we need to talk about small potatoes for? That's the deal. That's the deal. That's part of what the Neocons do. But unlike what the Vikings would do, because what the Vikings would do, they'd pillage, and they'd bring all the treasure home, and they'd celebrate and drink mead at the mead hall or whatever the hell, right? Not the mead hall, but you get the point. They drink whatever it was, they drank plenty of it. Unlike that, the neocons steal that money and they ain't sharing it with us. They're not bringing it home. They're not bringing it back because they don't have a country. They're globalists. They don't believe in countries. They're going to take that money, they're going to spread it, and it's going to go all over creation. Don't you believe for 1 second they didn't do that in Ukraine when they went there? Don't you think for 1 second at all those. How much the hell does it cost to build 36 biolabs? Can you imagine how much that costs? How many billions of dollars are in that? Billions and billions and billions of dollars. They spent money like it was water in Ukraine. Why? Because people in their circles were handling the money. People in their circles, it was full of corruption. People in their circles were integrated into the companies in Ukraine so they could get the money. It was a gigantic money laundering operation. That's another thing about the neocons. They're going to launder money into their pockets, into the pockets of their friends, but none of it's going to come back to the people. You know why? Because the people back in their home country are treated just like everybody else. They are suckers. They are to have their blood sucked out. And that's what they're doing to us right now. They're God, help the people of the EU, because they're just done. They're just fried. But because the neocons have their grips in them, they're going to have to, and this is when I think it turns, because they own both parties or all of the parties, all of the above, all of the potential people that could control finances in any given country are controlled by the neocons. When people get furious, they're going to say, we want our leader out. Okay, Blair's gone, and here's Bojo's gone, and here's another clown who's going to do the bidding of Foggy Bottom, right? I think at that point, when the people say we want change, and they realize, holy crap, we got another person, and they're doing exactly the same, and they wake up and they realize there ain't no out, that the neocons have seized power and didn't leave them an avenue to seek redress in their own government, that they are now shut out. I think that's when you get your Sri Lanka type moment. That's when you get to the point where people are swimming in the president's palace and burning down. And now it's already started in Holland, and it's going to get worse. I don't know about over here. Americans are so sheep, sheep. They're bad when the government tells them. They'll go punch me in the face for telling them that the government's lying to them. But, the Europeans, we'll see. This is neocon rule. And the Republicans, if let's say they win in November, you know what they're going to say? We've got to recognize Taiwan, because they're going to be mad. They're going to be like, look, okay, the Democrats got their war with Russia. No fair. We don't get our war with China. It's our turn. You got your war with Russia. Fine. You won. You get to go first. We now get our war with China. Come on. Let's go. Let's recognize Taiwan and get that war going. And the American people are going to say, what about there's no baby formula or whatever? And the Republicans are going to be like, oh, yeah, that's right. We're cutting food stamps. They're going to be like, how's that going to help baby food? And they're going to be like, we're cutting transportation and laying off a bunch of federal employees too. Why are you doing that? Shut up. You're asking too many questions, you idiots. We got need more money for war. Oh, by the way, we'll start drafting your ass because we're sending you over here to die somewhere in the South China Sea or whatever the hell. You're a goner. Send all of your kids. Send your kids, all of them, their history, their toast. That's the way that I mean, and there are people. Here's what kills me. I'm watching the Democrats. There were people who were like, yes, sirree. The Democrats, Trump is gone. The America is saved. Everything's good. And now we got a bunch of people like, America's in a world of shit. But if the Republicans win in November, oh, the sun will be shining on America again because my party will be in. And when my party gets in, oh, what a good time we're going to have when Josie comes home. Yes, sirree, as Steely Dan said, when Josie comes home, when my party gets in, and at some point their party's going to get in and screw up really, really bad and just do austerity and do their own version. The Democrats and Republicans are two different versions of neoliberalism, two different versions of neoconism, because they are both. Remember at the beginning, I said there's this evil blob and it expresses itself as wokeism. It expresses itself as neoliberalism. It expresses itself as neoconservatism, or I could do it the other way around and say there's this evil blob and we use various words to describe that blob, various words to name that blob. We call what that blob is doing neoconservatism, neoliberalism, wokeism. We call it that, right? In the same way, from the political party perspective, that evil blob expresses itself as Republicans or Democrats. And it's going to give you the same thing. It's just a little different. The Republicans' version of wokeism is a little more flag flying, a little more, I got to be for the family and I love God and guns. And so they got their things, right? That is their version of wokeism. It's different. It's certainly different, but it's a virtue signaling. I got more guns than I need, but not as many as I want, things like that. Just all of those things that don't make sense, but it's cultural. And it's like, I can brag that I got the most guns, or I'm more in favor of the Second Amendment than anybody I know, or I'm more in favor of these libertarian, Austrian policies, and whatever the case may be, whatever the dogma of their particular political beliefs are. But when it comes down to it, what the Republicans are going to produce is just the same thing that the Democrats produce. The only difference is they say we need to, the Republicans will come out and say we need to deregulate Wall Street. The Democrats will say we don't need to deregulate Wall Street. Now, both of them are going to deregulate Wall Street, but one of them will say we need to, and the other say we don't. They're both expressions of the same, different ways. One might argue that this creature, that this beast, this evil, foul beast that we're talking about has multiple personalities. And one of the personalities it has is Mitch McConnell, and another personality it has is Nancy Pelosi. And there are a few people. I think Rand Paul, when I look at him, because he's a libertarian, he doesn't fit in. He really doesn't fit in. There's a few people here and there, but not many of them. And I've got some things I really disagree with Rand Paul on, but I don't disagree with him in a lot of areas. There's some areas that he hits that the people in neither party will ever go to, that's outside of the orthodoxy. He goes outside of the orthodoxy at times, and I appreciate that with Rand Paul, even though he's a libertarian, and I totally disagree with libertarians on economic issues, etc. That doesn't mean that there's not some areas that I can't agree with Rand Paul and respect him for those areas that we don't just block people out because we have certain areas that we disagree with him on. He ain't well, let me tell you one thing that I appreciate about him. He ain't a neocon, so he ain't dragging us into World War Stinking 3. Even though, as a libertarian, he has some holes in his swing, because the libertarians hate the left, or their concept of the left. So he's going to he will go along with the anti-China rhetoric, which is pure imperialist garbage and trash. But he doesn't want the war with them. He may put them down. Oh, the Chinese communists, they use the word communist. They're radically anti-communist. So I got problems with him. I'm radically pro-sovereignty, and I think that every country should be able to do things the way they want to do it. It's none of our damn business. And these liberal interventionists on both sides of the aisle always saying China does this, therefore we got to go fix China. They're liberal interventionists. in the Republican Party. We got to go change China. We got to go change this country. Well, look at that country's doing. We got to change that country because they're not doing right. Their human rights are wrong, blah, blah, blah. Both parties play that bull crap. And it's liberal interventionism. It is why do they both play it? Because they are both expressions of this blob that I'm talking about. At any rate, thanks a lot, everybody. Let me look. I think we had some, not many, but oh, here's a super chat. Let's check it out. As former law enforcement, how many others in your profession would you say think similar to yourself? Thanks to that. There ain't a lot of people in any professions think similar to me. I'm a unique person. But no, all jokes aside, yeah, it tends to be a conservative. It does. Law enforcement tends to attract conservatives. So not a lot. Not that there aren't a lot of conservatives that I agree with on a lot of things, but I'm open for a lot of stuff. Any of the sheepy stuff, like if they tell me to hate this country, if everybody I know says we don't like this country, they're evil or whatever, I'm like, that's bullshit. Get out of here with that. But Russia really is evil. Oh no, but China really is evil. Yeah, get out of here. 2.9 billion laundered away. How's that all our politicians become millionaires on government salaries? Exactly. Let's go. Here we got a super chat. Alex Christoforus and Jackson Hinkle got banned on YouTube for challenging U.S. narratives on Ukraine. What are your thoughts? That's exactly what I would think YouTube would do. It's owned by Google. Look up this article that says Google is not what you think it is. Let me see if I can find it. Google, that's a good question. Google is not what you think. Julian Assange. I hope that article pops up. There we go. Let me share this article with you. I'm glad you asked about. I'm glad you asked me about that. Google is not what it seems. Here's an article by Julian Assange. Okay, and he goes on to say, and that was from his book, When Google Met WikiLeaks, and he describes the special relationship between Google, Hillary Clinton, and the State Department and what that means for the future of the internet. There you go. So that's When Google Met WikiLeaks. And he goes on to talk about it. He talks about the people in Google and how that worked at Google. He talks about the people that worked at Google and how many of them worked at the State Department and they went back and forth and back and forth. He's talking about, okay, let me read one paragraph. The stated reason for the visit was a book. Schmidt was presenting a treatise with Jared Cohen, the director of Google Ideas, an outfit that describes itself as Google's in-house think tank. I knew little about Cohen at the time. In fact, Cohen had moved to Google from the U.S. State Department in 2010. He had been a fast-talking Generation Y ideas man at state under 2 U.S. administration, a courtier from the world of policy think tanks and institutes, poached in his early 20s. He became a senior advisor for Secretaries of State Rice and Clinton. At the State Department on the policy planning staff, Cohen was soon christened Condi's party starter, channeling buzzwords from Silicon Valley into U.S. policy circles and producing delightful rhetorical concoctions such as public diplomacy. Now, this is Jared Cohen, the director of Google Ideas. That's what it is. So when you ask me about YouTube or Google, I'd simply say you're talking about direct connections to the U.S. State Department, direct connections to the intelligence community. So if you ask me about them, YouTube, Google, Twitter, all that stuff simply is just connected directly to the U.S. government's war machine. Oh, we got someone else. Let's look at this. First of all, thank you for all the time you put into the content. What your thoughts on Biden selling oil to China from strategic reserve? Thank you again. Okay, I guess it's something that wouldn't make people happy, but that ain't the real deal. I mean, that's something that just sounds terrible. Oh, how terrible. But in the big picture, what is the problem? The problem is that the United States instigated a war in Ukraine. Well, first of all, you've got COVID. We could go into the policies that were surrounding COVID, everything from the lockdowns and on and on and on, created part of this mess. And then the Ukrainian crisis drove the prices through the roof. So really, what difference does it make if we sell our oil to whoever or keep it? It's not going to affect the oil prices. I mean, it's something for people to talk about and all that, and say, why the hell are you doing that? But what is, if you look, first of all, the strategic oil reserve is the strategic oil reserve. They should just keep it on the side in case something bad happens and you need it. But they're selling it, and I think they're trying do their best to keep price. They can't explain how they're doing it, but it's probably they're doing that in a way to keep the prices down. They may say, look, China's buying all of this oil on the market, and that's driving the price up. Let's sell them ours. Let's get some at a discounted price. And, I think it's some way that Biden and his team felt they could manipulate oil prices to bring the prices down, because that is his main focus right now, is to get oil prices down, going towards, going in through the summer, going towards November. That's his main goal right now, is to get oil prices down, because he knows that that's death to him. So that's what I think about that. So what else did he say? Rashid said, yeah, that's it. Any others? I don't see. Ooh, got another super chat. I always got to answer my super chats. The political system in this country is like a flounder fish. It's been laying on its left side for so long, both eyes are on the right now. That is it in a nutshell. That is it in a nutshell. And it's not even, when you get to the neocons, it gets beyond right and left. Let's see what we got here. Alex got silence on YouTube. The Duran will be next. The government is filled with racist. Freedom of speech has been banned in the U.S. Pretty much, yeah. And it's just as bad in Europe. Let me see. So I think that's it. Okay, I think I've hit all the super chats. Well, thanks a lot, everybody. Certainly appreciate it. Another night. Having fun here, chatting with all my friends. I'll try to get on in the morning. I'm going to try to get on in the morning. Hopefully I can. Wow, I've been on an hour. It doesn't seem like that. Thanks a lot, everybody. Don't forget, look in the show notes. If you look in the show notes, you'll see I've got my PayPal information on there, which is my email address, garlandin@gmail.com. You can now do buy me a coffee to help keep the contribute and help keep the channel going. We got rockfin.com and a Patreon. Please become a Patreon if you can, or buy me a coffee. You can also become a monthly subscriber on there. Also, please, I want everybody to smash the like button and make sure you go to rockfin.com, ROKFIN.com, rockfin.com/Garland Nixon, or just go to Rockfin and search me. I'm right there. I'm easy to find. There's 2 ways to join the Rockfin. You can just become a subscriber, and that doesn't cost anything. If you can become a member, that's $9.99 a month. That really helps me out, helps keep the channel going. I appreciate that. Rockfin.com/Garland Nixon. My email is garlandin@gmail.com. Peace. Thank you very much.